When the world has got you down. And
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alls, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here's your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and Cassie Cruz.
all you gotta do is sing a song.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter.
And I'm Cassie Cruz. Welcome to Love Conquers Alls. We are so excited to create a platform for those of us touched by Alzheimer's.
And we have cutting news and invaluable resources.
Like the guest we will be chatting with today, Teresa Valko. Teresa began volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association over 8 years ago and now serves as the board chair for the California Central Coast chapter. She is also the Alzheimer's Congressional Ambassador to the California 26th Federal District. She is a member of the Alzheimer's Impact Movement Leadership Society, a member of the Alzheimer's Women Initiative Committee for Ventura County, a member of the Ventura County Dementia Friendly Committee, a member, of the Alzheimer's Association Community Voices Program, and a 8-time grand champion fundraiser in the Thousand Oaks Westlake Village Walk to End Alzheimer's. Her commitment to the mission of Alzheimer's Association comes from her personal connection to Alzheimer's disease. Her mother is currently living in late-stage Alzheimer's and will be the 8th person in her family that was lost to Alzheimer's. And on her mother's side, there is 100% occurrence of Alzheimer's. Teresa has a BA from Carson Newman University in biology and an MS in reproductive biology from the University of Alabama in Birmingham. She lives in a small avocado ranch in Camarillo, California. That has to be awesome. And
Beautiful.
She loves knitting.
I love knitting. I love this woman already. Let's talk to her. Teresa, are you there?
Well, hello. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I am here, and I was getting tired just listening to all the things that you read. So it make me feel old and busy.
I thought I was an advocate. I know now the bar has been raised.
I don't know about that.
I'm excited to hear your story and your journey of advocacy. So we'd love to hear how you got started.
And thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I feel so strongly that Alzheimer's is something that we all should be talking about, whether we're personally affected by it or not. It is an epidemic. It's a public health crisis. And programs like what you're doing are so vital to us being able to get the word out, get those conversations started. As busy as I am, it definitely is going to take a village approach to move the needle on what's happening with this disease. So thank you for what you're doing. This is exactly what this disease needs. This is the attention it needs.
Thank you. That's very validating. And if we can be a conduit for people like you that are out there doing what needs to be done, then we've done our job.
What I'm wondering, Teresa, is would you please share with us your personal story about how you became involved with the Alzheimer's Association?
Sure. Unfortunately, my Alzheimer's story begins back when I was in my freshman year of college, when my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My family is full of scientists and medical professionals, and it was important to us to get a diagnosis. So even though it wasn't very common during those years, because this was the mid to early 80s, to receive a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, she did receive that diagnosis. And I was fortunate enough to have firsthand exposure to her living with Alzheimer's, as I was able to spend my summers during my college years with her during that time. Unfortunately, after her diagnosis, she was the oldest of her siblings. Her 3 surviving siblings, because she did have a couple that died earlier in life, but her 3 surviving siblings in the years that followed were also all 3 diagnosed with Alzheimer's as well.
Wow.
Yeah, we knew that was a very ominous turn for our family, and we were learning more about the disease and its prevalence and its epidemiology, and realizing that the occurrence within that generation was not a good forecast for the following generations. And So those four individuals, of course, all passed away from Alzheimer's. And several years later, my mother's brother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in his late 60s, followed by my mother's only sister, who was diagnosed. And then 3 to 4 years later, my mother was diagnosed. My aunt and uncle, her only two siblings, have already passed away, and my mother is now living in late stage Alzheimer's.
How old is your mother?
She just turned 85. She was about 73 when she received her diagnosis, but a common story with individuals who have loved ones with Alzheimer's, they can almost always start pointing to evidence that happened long before a diagnosis came, that were just unrecognized or were kind of explained away in other ways that were actually symptoms of the disease. So my mother's husband was her primary caregiver. Up until about 5 years ago, she became very ill when she was still living at home. So she kind of was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and never went back home. And that was the year when I really became aware of my mom's symptoms, and it was obvious that she was developing Alzheimer's. At that time, her brother and sister had already been diagnosed with the disease. So I took that opportunity to transition from professional scientific world and into volunteering for the Alzheimer's Association. It took me a few years to find just the right situation. And in 2011, I did my first walk to end Alzheimer's. My mother actually came here from Georgia to do the walk with me. And it was a very poignant day for me because my mother had been diagnosed the year before. Her brother had died 5 months prior to that walk to end Alzheimer's, and her sister was in mid-stage Alzheimer's. And when we were there at the event, there was a lot of festivities and speakers, and of course it's very purple everywhere and lots of people. And my mom turned to me and asked me what the occasion was, what the event was that we were attending that day. And I told her that it was the walk to end Alzheimer's, and we were there to raise funds and awareness in the fight against Alzheimer's. And she became very concerned immediately and reached out to me, and she asked me, oh, honey, do you know someone with Alzheimer's? Yeah, it was an important moment for me personally, because that was kind of my call to action moment. That was my cue that I needed to do more. So following that walk, I approached the Alzheimer's Association locally and told them I was interested in becoming an active volunteer. And that launched my interaction with the Alzheimer's Association.
Teresa, I have a question for you. Having a parent with Alzheimer's, every time I can't think of a word, I panic. And it's actually really stressful. And you being in the world of science, is it easier or harder to come to terms with that fear? Because I have two daughters who every time I say, oh, I'm getting Alzheimer's, which they always say first, stop that, don't say that. And second, they say, Mom, we forget words all the time. I guess, and it's actually a really big source of stress. And I'm sure for a lot of people as caregivers, we see our future.
Yes. It's a very layered answer. And I do believe that the answer for each person will be different if they're asked this, because each person has their own individual chemistry in terms of psychology and how their thought processes work and how they deal with stress factors. For me personally, as you mentioned, I'm a scientist, so I kind of have this mentality of knowledge is power. And I want that knowledge. I'm inquisitive by nature and curious, and I want to know everything I can. And knowing that our profile in our family is so devastating, and there is proof that having an immediate family member with Alzheimer's increases one's own risk of developing Alzheimer's. So I did go forward, and I had genetic testing. And I do know that I have one copy of the ApoE4 gene, which has been linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's. My mother also had testing done as part of a drug trial that she entered, and she has the same profile that I do. I've had a couple of cousins also undergo testing, and they too have the same profile. I believe in our family, as far as the APOE4 gene is concerned, that while it may be at play, I don't think it's the only factor in play. I think there's something else, most likely genetic, from the obvious evidence that's going on that puts us at a much higher risk than just one copy of APOE4 would do. I have cousins that are absolutely adamant that they don't want to know what their status is because emotionally it would be too much for them to be comfortable with. For me and my cousins that have been tested, we're all scientists and we all kind of have that same mentality. As far as its effect on my everyday thinking and how I live, I don't want to use the word blessing because it's so strong, but I will say that what it has done is create an acute awareness of everyday blessings in my life and the moments that I'm presented with. I go around and I speak a lot on behalf of the Alzheimer's Association and to raise awareness. And I often speak about people that are living with Alzheimer's, like my mother. I go to visit her and I'm able to connect with her in these very short moments where she has a realization of who I am. She may not be able to say my name or tell anyone who I am as far as her daughter, but she knows inside that I'm someone that makes her happy and that she's happy to see and be with. And they may be fleeting moments, but those moments are everything. And that's all she has now because of how her brain has been damaged by this disease. And I know that being so likely to develop Alzheimer's myself, that I am wasting my time if I live every day right now trying to create memories for my latter years. That's not going to be useful for me. And what's important for me to do now, and for I think all of us to do, is to really savor and enjoy and lean into the moments that we have right now.
Amen. Oh my gosh. I did a film based on my mom called My Mom and the Girl. And that was the message, was to lean into it and then and in the moment and really learning that lesson from my mother and, you know, really treasuring those lucid nuggets that we get. I think because your mom is still there, my mom is still there, some inside, and my mom lights up when she sees me, and every once in a while she gets a "God, I love you" out, and that's my reward.
And when that happens, it's everything.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for everyone listening to kind of frame it in that way, because a lot of people have a misperception of how to approach someone with Alzheimer's in terms of their own framework of how life is. They're not going to remember me. Why should I go and visit them? They won't remember the minute after I leave that I was there. What good is it? When we are socializing with somebody who has Alzheimer's, you have to think of it as a moment to moment experience. And tell me if you agree that, you know, when you bring a wonderful moment to someone who has Alzheimer's, it lasts. They may not remember you, but that good feeling resonates for a long time.
Yeah, I believe with you entirely. And I use that whole concept to plan out my time with her, in that I don't feel like if I want to see her at Christmas time, it needs to be on Christmas Day. She doesn't have that level of, connection to know whether I'm there on December 25th or on her birthday or whatever the occasion may be. So I'm able to work around that and not feel, I don't put that pressure on myself to be there for certain days or at certain times or at certain milestones. But I know that when I can get to her and when I am with her, that every moment that I have with her and every time she's able to feel a connection with the world she used to live in and the people that she loves the most and that love her the most, that it's like the MasterCard or American Express commercial. It's priceless. Those moments are everything.
It's being present in whatever moment that is there at that time, whatever it may be. And it might not be what we think that it should be. I think that's the conversation, hopefully, that we're changing and opening up, that things aren't the cookie cutter of what perhaps what we thought things were. And that's the shift that needs to happen. I want to ask you about being an advocate or the advocacy forum. What does that mean in your world?
Well, for me, it's been a learning process. And what I've learned is that I, of course, volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association. We've mentioned that. And I volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association because their mission is my personal mission, point for point. And that is, I want to get out, educate people about overall brain health. I want to support and advocate for research into Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And I want to help provide care and support for those living with Alzheimer's and their caregivers until we can find a cure or an effective treatment for this disease. That's the mission of the Alzheimer's Association. It's my personal mission. What I've learned in terms of advocacy is that advocacy can raise all of those efforts to new, more effective levels. So I've really done a shift the last few years into putting a lot of my effort into advocacy efforts. So it involves meetings throughout the year with elected officials on all levels. I speak to city, county, state, and federal officials, lawmakers, about the importance of having government support in all of these aspects. The bills that the Alzheimer's Association helps to curate and develop go to raising support for caregivers and those living with Alzheimer's in a variety of ways, and educating the public about the disease, and in even lifestyle prevention efforts. And of course, the big one is the funding into Alzheimer's and other research, which is going to change the trajectory of this disease.
One of the things that frightens me is the cost of this disease until there's a cure. Like your mother and my mother, it's a long term. Yeah, it's been a dozen years, and it can bankrupt you. Luckily, I was able to find her a place that offers incredible care, and they earmark a certain amount of beds in their facilities so that people like my mom can have an amazing place to stay. That's
not
rare.
Not everybody has that opportunity.
I should mention the Jewish home for the aged, and I just want to give them a shout out because Medicare doesn't take care of people in that way that most people in their advanced stages of dementia and Alzheimer's need.
You're right. And just to throw a couple of numbers out there, statistics, in 2019 alone, Alzheimer's disease will cost our country on the whole $290 billion with a B dollars, and most of that being Medicaid and Medicare dollars. The average cost for someone diagnosed right now with Alzheimer's will be in excess of $350,000. Now, we all know that most families in the U.S. don't have $350,000 to address that. And the only way we're going to be able to overcome that burden is to, number one, get in front of the disease by researching the disease and finding those effective treatments and preventions, and also to help these families that are dealing with these exorbitant costs.
What have you been able to advocate for as far as funding?
The funding for Alzheimer's disease and related dementia historically has been very abysmal for our country. It started when I came on the scene. We were around between $400 and $500 million per year. And the Alzheimer's Association went to the experts, they went to the researchers, they went to the economists, and they looked at the other leading causes of death in the U.S., all of which are on the decrease. And they asked these experts to develop the plan that will give the Alzheimer's community the profile that these other diseases have, such as breast cancer, prostate cancer, HIV, all which are on the decline of prevalence and occurrence. And what they came back with was they let us know that what we're lacking that these other diseases have are dedicated funds from the NIH into Alzheimer's and related dementia. So what they recommended is that the funding level from the NIH, which is part of our government, be at a level of at least $2 billion per year for at least a 10-year period. So over the past, let's say 6 years, the efforts of the Alzheimer's Association have increased our funding into Alzheimer's and related dementia from around 400 million per year. We have now just hit 2.8 billion per year.
Wow.
So we are finally where we need to be. And that's all credited to the efforts of the Alzheimer's Association, the Alzheimer's Impact Movement, which is the advocacy arm of the Alzheimer's Association, and the literally thousands upon thousands of advocates that we have through our work out in the community with the Alzheimer's Association. So we are at a very, very exciting time right now in terms of research. And what's important, I think, in this concept of dollars into research, it's not alone anyway. It's not just the money coming from the NIH going into research, although that's very important and it is very fruitful. What it does is it provides a culture around this disease that these other diseases have had, and that when a disease state is given a status of a certain level of investment, it begins to attract quality researchers, quality programs, quality universities, quality startup companies that will invest into this disease state because it provides for them just like it provides for the disease.
Right.
It's very difficult to bring in our top researchers in this country into a project that isn't well funded.
Right.
Great job. Great job, everybody. Congratulations. That's a huge feat.
Yeah.
And with that, can I ask you the caregiver stats and issues within that structure?
Can we do that after we go to a break, Miss Cassie? Because that's a big chunk and I want to hear it all without breaking it up.
I love it.
We'll be right back with Love Conquers Alls after a word from this sponsor. Hi, it's Susie from Love Conquers Alls. I just wanted to talk to you about grocery store shopping. I don't know about you, but I really don't love it. For one thing, I buy too much every single time, and I forget the one thing I really needed. So I found a solution, and it's called Instacart. It's this amazing app where you can get local, fresh groceries, including organic, delivered straight to your door in as fast as an hour. Instacart gives you unlimited grocery delivery for one low monthly fee, which is much better than the other apps that nickel and dime you every time you use them. And they connect you with a personal shopper in your area to shop and deliver your groceries based on your preferences from your favorite stores. So if you never want to step into a grocery store again, start your 14-day free trial following the link in the show notes so Instacart knows that we sent you and to help support our show. Enjoy all your free time. Instacart. Never step foot in a grocery store again. And now back to Love Conquers Alls. We're back.
Yay! Hey, I was asking Teresa about caregiver stats and the issues in that support structure of the great funding that they've just been able to acquire.
It's not good right now. I can tell you that. It's a little disturbing. The number of people we have living in the U.S. with Alzheimer's right now is about 5.8 million. The number of caregivers for that almost 6 million people is 14 million unpaid caregivers. These 14 million unpaid caregivers are dealing lots of times with having to hold down a job, having to raise their own children. We have that sandwich generation that is about our age, it sounds like, elderly parents, but still have children that they may need to care for.
Mm-hmm.
We have caregivers that are retiring early so they can take care of their parents. They are taking extended leaves from their work in order to caregive, that are giving up their careers in order to caregive. The impact to our economy and our nation and families is difficult to measure because it is so staggering. And I also want to say that women are disproportionately affected by this disease. Not only are 2 out of every 3 individuals living with the disease women, but 2 out of every 3 caregivers are also women. So that's something that's being looked at very, very closely and investigated. But we can't ignore the fact that women are being disproportionately affected. I think the effort on the part of the Alzheimer's Association to provide care and support to caregivers in the way of having support groups, of having classes teaching about various caregiving aspects, whether it's behavior and communication or the nitty gritty nuts and bolts caregiving at home. And all of those services, all of those classes, all of the education is free to the public. It's online. There are classes across the country for people to attend. And the same with support groups. We have online support groups and we have in-person support groups across the country. And we also have a 1-800 helpline, which is 24/7. I think we're at 157 or some crazy number of languages available, 24/7, 365. So it's incredible resources for the caregivers, and no question is too big or too small for our helpline. In terms of advocacy, one of the big pieces that we're working on right now is we had the HOPE Act pass a couple of years ago in conjunction with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which we call CMS, has now provided a billing code so that care planning can be covered by Medicare. This is so important. And the problem was that no one knew about it.
That's the whole issue about most of the stuff we're talking about. That's why we want to start talking.
Talk to your healthcare provider, ask them about this. If they don't know about it, tell them to get the code so that you can get your care planning. This is so important for every family affected by Medicare. And we now have a bill that addresses the need to get this word out, disseminate the information to the healthcare clinicians, offices across the country so that everyone's aware of this service because it's being underutilized.
So I was actually thinking earlier about the fact that a lot of people that bought insurance that is supposed to help you with caregiving and assisted living that was supposed to take you through the end of your life, those insurance policies have suddenly cut back on what they provide in their services. And I've seen it firsthand with friends' parents who thought that they were covered for the rest of their life, and they weren't.
And that's a little different because what you're talking about, the long-term care insurance or LTC insurance, that actually covers the actual care, whereas this code covers care planning. So care planning is when you sit down with your clinician and social workers and other individuals, counselors that can help you walk through the steps, let you know what to anticipate in terms of needs so that you can put your personal preferences in place and deal and prepare for what's coming.
Oh, I see.
LTC insurance covers the actual care. For instance, my mother has a LTC policy, which is covering her cost in her memory care facility that she's in now.
Do you find that a lot of those insurance companies are cutting back what they're providing and the amounts that they are providing? Because I have seen that with several people, and I don't know how prevalent that is, but that's scary.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak too much to it because it's not really my expertise, but I do know that those types of policies are getting more and more difficult to secure. I think the insurance companies are probably realizing, because they deal in actuary math, they're realizing that it's not a good business program for them to insure these people with the Alzheimer's crisis building the way that it is. I think one of the alternatives that I've been learning more about lately is a type of life insurance that has a care expense component to it. So I would tell people, speak to your financial planner, ask them what the best program is for you personally and your family.
Yeah, because therein lies the disaster for all of us, is that if you have no funds anymore for your care, you can end up in a government-run facility that you wouldn't put your enemy in, and it's scary. and it's the truth.
Yeah, and you've touched on another issue, and that is lack of care facilities. We are not prepared currently for what's happening, and especially what's coming. And that's the area of the greatest deficiency, is for low income, even no income individuals that are living with Alzheimer's. We are not prepared currently for that population in this country.
Not at all. And I firsthand saw that at the facility that my mother was at prior to this, the one she's at now, which was one of the few in LA at the time that specialized in dementia and memory care issues. And it started out lovely. And my mom was there, I want to say 6 years. And by the end of that, it was so overcrowded and there was not enough caregivers per person. And it was chaos. I'm talking expensive chaos.
I recently heard the term compassion fatigue. Are you familiar with that, Teresa?
I'm not, but it already speaks to me, just the words, because I know what they're trying to what they're trying to convey, and it's real, and the caregivers are
devastated,
struggling out there. They're in need of resources. The Alzheimer's Association, as much as they're doing, the need is so great and the numbers are so great that it's going to take a lot more so that these caregivers across the country and indeed across the world feel supported. Our caregivers struggle to maintain a balance between self and caregiving. They often neglect themselves, and it's to the detriment of all involved. There are statistics that show that in many cases, the caregiver may succumb to serious illness, if not death, before the one that they're caring for does.
Exactly. Yep.
It's very disturbing, and we should all be concerned.
So if you are a person who is caring for someone with Alzheimer's and you're listening to this, and you may not be close to an association or a facility, what would you recommend that someone could do that would help? Maybe they can move the needle just a little bit.
Well, I would say if you're a caregiver, and every caregiver needs support, the first thing I would recommend is that you go online to alz.org, and we have an online community for caregivers. And I continuously hear wonderful things about the caregivers being able to connect with other caregivers, to being able to connect with healthcare professionals that can advise them, and the amount of support they feel from that online community. And again, we also have the 1-800 number that they can call any time of the day, any day of the year, to ask any questions or even just talk. A lot of people just call and talk because they need that, and it's a form of therapy, and we encourage that.
And what about advocacy? What could they do to help the movement towards, the conversation becoming more prevalent and mainstream?
Or any of us, what could we do, right?
If you want to get involved in advocacy as far as moving these pieces of legislation, the first step is to become an advocate. You can sign up online, and what that will do is when we have bills that are important for our Alzheimer's community and they're going into vote or going onto the floor, as they say, you'll get an email alert telling you this bill number 1234 is going to be up for vote tomorrow. If I think all you have to do is fill out your name and click send. It automatically sends a letter to your legislator, and the system takes care of you. They send it to state, federal, whatever is appropriate for that bill. And what that does is it sends a message to our lawmakers. If a bill is up for vote and suddenly they are inundated with literally thousands of letters, they understand, they get the message that their constituents are concerned about Alzheimer's, and they want to see something done. So every advocate we can get participating in that program is valuable for getting our agenda items put forth and changing what's happening with this disease. Beyond that, you can also reach out to our advocacy team, and we have every single member of the House and the Senate in the U.S. Has an ambassador assigned to them. It's a volunteer position, and that ambassador acts as a liaison between the Alzheimer's Association and their office, explaining to them what our priorities are, what needs to happen, what they can do in terms of bills and efforts to change the Alzheimer's landscape. Those individuals, ambassadors, I'm an ambassador to the 26th district here in California. We have teams of people. My team, we have about a dozen people on it, and we invite those people to attend meetings with us, with the members of Congress, with their staff, to offer their personal stories, to explain how this disease is impacting families. And there's nothing more powerful than having the actual caregivers or the actual individuals who have lost loved ones or the actual individuals living with the disease to sit there and look the legislator in the eye and explain to them the profound impact this disease makes.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's just recap that for 1 second. Let's say that I'm a caregiver and I'm like overloaded and there's like no way, like I can't do one more thing. I'm totally overloaded. If there is one thing that they could do, go online, find the advocacy forum, find out what bill it is and hit a button. And then that automatically sends to the legislators this letter of advocacy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because as well correct. As I do that it's an overwhelming task. And there's like, no, I can't go to Congress. I can't help that way. But I understand too that sometimes you don't even feel like you can help with anything because you need the help yourself. And I just want to always recommend to everybody, courage is different than what we think it is. Vulnerability and asking for help is really important. If you're a caregiver, please ask, reach out. There is a community that will help you. We want to. There's so many resources out there. You can find it. And I'm encouraging you to ask because I know how hard it can be.
And Teresa, what you were talking about, sharing your personal story, I think personal stories are incredibly powerful. And it's good to hear that it's incredibly powerful in terms of legislature, because I know just being a storyteller and making a film, this was the whole motivation for Love Conquers All. I started a conversation and I didn't want to finish it. I wanted to continue it. And I think because I shared my personal story, which by the way, I didn't want to, it was very difficult to make the decision. Do I want to tell this story? Because although I call it a joyous look at Alzheimer's because it's a positive way to look at it, it's still reliving it. It sucks. Yeah. And so, yes. But it's important. And I think you're so right. Being able to share your story and, and touch people so that they can really put a face and a voice to these stories and not dismiss them.
And the story that I would inquire about, Teresa, is since you have that history in your family and you have that gene, has that changed how you live your life, being the scientist that you are?
Because of my scientific mind and beyond that, just because of the risk that I walk around with every day, I tend to try to compare my life, my lifestyle in every way to that of my mother and my aunt and uncle and their mother before them and all of that. And I'm hoping that some of the differences that I'm making in my life will make a difference for my years to come. But until then, I use the Alzheimer's Association has a list called 10 Ways to Love Your Brain. And those are evidence-based recommendations on how to lower your risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's. So I incorporate as many of those into my lifestyle as I can. And it has a profound impact.
Does that have to do with the brain health that you shared? Is that part of that?
It does.
Can you share that part with us right after we take that break? Because I want to make sure I hear all of the things about the brain health. I need that.
This is Don Priest, beloved producer of Love Conquers Alls. Hey, if you've been thinking about starting your own podcast, stop thinking and do it. Buzzsprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online and listed in all the major podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more within minutes of finishing your first recording. Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed. So join Love Conquers Alls and over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. And now, back to Love Conquers Alls.
And we're back. We're back with Teresa Valko, and we're talking about brain health and the kinds of tools that the Alzheimer's Association provides on their website to keep your brain healthy. And
I'll list the 10 ways that we can all love our brain briefly. And one is to break a sweat. So that's exercising every day or as often as possible. Hitting the books. So, challenging yourself to learn new things, taking classes and so forth. Budding out, that's cessation of smoking, which we know is not good for any part of our body. Following your heart, so lowering our risk of cardiovascular disease correlates to lowering our risk of dementia. Heads up in terms of using seatbelts when we're driving our car, wearing helmets when we're doing sports, eating right. So the Mediterranean or Mediterranean Dash or Mind diets are recommended for that. Good sleep hygiene, getting 7 to 9 hours of good sleep every night. Taking care of your mental health, reducing your risk, depression, and so forth, being social, spending time with your friends, and stumping yourself. So challenging yourself with, everyone always wants to ask me, do you play Sudoku? And the key is to not only play games that challenge your brain, but then switch them up. Don't play Sudoku every day.
Right.
Try a new game every week. Do new challenging things, because every time you do that, you're making your brain more robust and agile.
Well, that's perfect, because I took up hip hop, and let me tell you, it's got my brain flipping around.
Good for you.
Yeah, and piano too. I took up piano, and you know what? That's always a challenge. Pick up. I think if you always wanted to play violin, try it. Who cares? If you suck, you suck. But I'm telling you, I'm not the greatest pianist, but let me tell you, I have a lot of fun doing it.
It's not about becoming an accomplished pianist. It's about challenging your brain. So good for you.
Yeah, no, and it's a hell of a lot of fun, and you can sing along. And if you can't sing, try that. And, music is magic with people with dementia, and it seems to open up those pathways. So if you don't sing anyway. Who cares?
Hey, also, right. Susie, you wanted to ask Teresa something, because you just went through something with your daughter.
Oh, yes. Well, this is off topic about Alzheimer's. However, my daughter just had a baby via IVF. What a process. You had a career in embryology, and wow, it's an amazing miracle. I literally did the night shift last night, so if I'm stumbling over my words, that's why, everybody. But wow, she is a miracle, this little Eden of ours. Her name is Eden, and thank you for all your research and everything you've done to make this happen for us.
And it was a very rewarding career for me, and I miss it every day, but I'm so thrilled for your family too to hear about your successes. But I'll tie it back into Alzheimer's for you. And that's going to happen when we start talking about this version of Alzheimer's called younger onset Alzheimer's, which occurs in individuals who are 65 and under. This is the one version of Alzheimer's that the scientists have been able to identify very precisely individual genes that cause that form of Alzheimer's. So I call them black and white genes. If you have the gene, you will definitely get this form of Alzheimer's. If you don't have that gene, you will not get that particular form, that younger onset form.
Wow.
So what that does when you start thinking about IVF is it opens the door for the possibility of the procedure called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. So pre-implantation genetic diagnosis is used in conjunction with in vitro fertilization. The patient undergoes IVF, the embryos are cultured in the lab, and at a certain point during that culture time, individual cells are removed from each embryo, and they are assessed, and then the physician and the embryologist are able to select out only the embryos that are negative for that gene and transfer them into the uterus for pregnancy.
It's one of the genes that they look for now?
It wouldn't be routine, but if you know that you're a carrier, if the individual knows that they're a carrier for that gene, that would be the whole reason for doing IVF, is to use that tool of pre-implantation diagnosis and select out for that.
Wow. Amazing.
So I have a dear friend who is, I believe he's 30 now. He lost his mom at age 49 to younger onset Alzheimer's. It is the genetic form. He lost his grandmother and an aunt, and I don't know how many others to this form. And he underwent testing through the DIAN network, which is the Dominantly Inherited Alzheimer's Network here in the U.S. out of Washington University in St. Louis. And he found that he is negative. He does not carry the gene.
Oh, God bless.
But during the time that he was being tested, he was also getting engaged and getting married to a lovely bride. And I spoke to them because they are friends of mine about what course they would take if indeed his test came back positive and they wanted to have a family. And this is what our plan was for them.
Wow.
Well, you did tie it in perfectly. That's amazing.
It is amazing. I also want to ask, how many types of Alzheimer's is there and dementia?
Well, that's a very good question. And it's something that the researchers are working very, very diligently on. Right now, I would say we're just in two categories. The younger onset version, that's the 65 and earlier, younger. And then I call it the traditional onset Alzheimer's, or the late onset Alzheimer's, which is what you've experienced, Susie, in your family and mine, in that it comes in after the age of 65.
Mm-hmm.
There are scientists that believe that within that traditional age onset of Alzheimer's, there are various forms, but I haven't seen anything concrete come from that quite yet.
Very amazing. I just want to ask one last question. Could you please talk about your knitting?
Well, I've been knitting the entire time we've been recording.
What are you knitting, Teresa?
I'm knitting a hat for my husband.
And what color is it?
It is camo green. He has green eyes. It's a great color for him. I learned how to knit when I was in 5th grade. And I kind of picked it up and put it down for years. I went through phases where I was too cool to knit. And then when I was pregnant with my first child, which is 22 years ago, I picked it up to knit a blanket for her. And I haven't put it down since then. And I knit every day.
Oh, wow.
And I love it. And it challenges my brain, and it makes me be social. And I attend retreats all over the country every year, and it's some of my favorite days.
Oh, I love it. I love it. We send pictures so we can see some of them. We'll put them up on our social media. I also knit and crochet. And
you do?
I do. I always have a million plates I'm juggling, way too many. I had a company called Shrug Attack, and I made shrugs. Like, I don't know if you know what shrugs are, little short sweaters. Because
Yes.
I'm probably not as fast as you, so I couldn't keep up, but I love it. I love it. And it's also very meditative.
That's right. Tell my husband that.
That's right. She's doing your brain health. Hello. And
That's
you're getting
right.
a hat out of it, for God's sakes, in camo. Please. Anyway, Teresa, thank you so much. You're a pleasure, and we hope you come back.
Thank you all so much for having me. This really is such an important thing that you're doing. It's making a difference, and I, along with the rest of the Alzheimer's community, deeply appreciate your effort.
Oh my gosh, the pleasure is all ours, and we want to thank you to our listeners. We hope you liked our show. Please subscribe and share this podcast with others who are also dealing with Alzheimer's. We have so many incredible guests lined up, ready to inspire and inform.
And if you have any things you want to talk about, or if you want to support us financially, you can, so that we can continue to bring this awesome podcast to you and bring you great guests and real stories and real people. We do this with our sweat equity and the love of everyone who is dealing with this, and it will help us get promotion out there. So just throwing that out there.
Remember, love is powerful. Love is contagious. Love conquers all.
All you gotta do is sing a song. All you gotta do is sing a song.